Hi there, this is Billy Tarascio with the Modern Divorce Podcast, joined today by CDFA Julie Kern. Julie, how are you doing today?
I am great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. So I recently did a podcast about women in divorce and why women end up financially much worse off than men do in divorce, why they recover slower, and what women can do about it. It was controversial. People did not like it. I got a lot of hate mail from mostly men who were like, I've never seen a woman pay a man anything. What are you talking about? Lots and lots of hate mail. But that is the reality. And this is something that you see every day, right?
Absolutely.
So, first, go ahead and tell us what a CDFA does.
A certified divorce financial analyst is someone who's gone through some training and passed an exam and is therefore qualified to provide financial advice specific to the areas that pertain to divorce. And in addition to that, I'm a CPA. And so I also happen to have the tax expertise to be able to give tax advice as well. And I think that can be really an important area that can be overlooked during divorce as well.
I absolutely, completely, and totally agree with you. That is a big deal. So, you don't do financial planning.
I do actually. So my company has two sides to it. Bridge Financial Strategies is our wealth management financial planning services firm. And then Bridge Divorce Strategies was created specifically to help women specifically women or primarily women going through divorce. And the reason for that is that I kept meeting these women post divorce, and they'd already made all of these really important decisions that they couldn't go back and change. And I kept thinking, if I would have met you 6 or 12 months ago, I could have probably helped you to make some better choices as far as which assets you took and things like that, that would have put you in a better place. So it was my idea to be able to meet these women earlier in the process to really be able to make a difference in their result.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. My podcast about why women get less in divorce was really a call to women to take greater interest in their own career and in their own earning capacity and take greater responsibility for their future financial success. And it is so. What I think I want to do with you today is talk about that timing piece. Like if you're thinking about how to take care of yourself financially and you're happily married or you're not yet married, you're not going through divorce, what's your advice for that set of women?
Good question. I think it's really important that women step up and not be afraid. Often I meet women who are they feel uneducated in areas of finance, particularly when it comes to things like investments and investment strategies and taxes. Even though women statistically have taken a more active role in things like budgeting and bill paying for their families, they are still only about 25% of the time involved with those more technical areas. And, in a marriage, it makes sense to divide responsibilities between spouses to get everything done. But that doesn't mean that you should just let your husband take care of the finances without being involved. So one of the things that we do is we make a pretty big deal of both spouses participating in at least some of the meetings so that both spouses are aware of where they sit today, what they have, what their goals are for the future, that they're both on the same page, and then what's the plan to get from here to there.
That's fantastic. I love that. And the key takeaways I'm hearing is, number one, don't be intimidated. Don't think this is something you can't do or that you shouldn't do. Don't think this is like mowing the yard and you can just be like, you handle it. I don't have to look at it. Like you do. You have to look at your lawn. You have to sign off on your lawn. And if you do nothing else, one of the most important things you can do is look at your net worth every year. This is something that my dad has been drilling into me since I was a little girl, because finance isn't that complicated. It's simply understanding your money. So how much do I have in assets? How much do I have in debts? And what is my net worth? And if you just track that number, every quarter or every year, you're going to feel more empowered and you're going to know what you have. So I love that. Like if you're participating in meetings, at the bare minimum, you should know what you have. Is that right?
That's totally right.
Okay. And so then that is for our women who are happily married or not yet married. These are just, where do I start if I'm not sure and if money intimidates me? And that's where you start, right? Net worth and savings.
Yes.
For our women who are thinking that they're probably going to get divorced. Now, you may know most of the time women are filing for divorce more often than men. And most of the time they've thought about it or they've sort of seen it coming for about 3 years. So to those women who are in that 3-year time frame, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that, again, you want to start with finding out what you have, data gathering, find out what investment accounts you have and where they are. And if you don't know who the financial advisor even is, find it out. Or if your husband has been making the investment decisions on his own, find that out. And then, start gathering a list at the very least of what are your assets and what are your debts. And so therefore, what is your net worth? Because that's, take that number and divide by 2, and that's roughly what you'll have to work with post-divorce. And then of course there may be child support and or spousal maintenance to supplement income. But as far as the assets and debts that you may walk away with, it's really important to know what they are. And looking at tax returns is not something that most people find enjoyable, but it's a really good place to help you see where the income is coming from. There'll be lists there'll be a number for dividends or interest income or capital gains, and that can clue you in that there are non-retirement accounts that are producing those amounts. So it can help you know where to look. And of course, a financial person can help you with that as well. I think it's good, even if you're thinking about divorce, to have just an initial consultation with a financial professional like me who understands both taxes and, money investments and can help you uncover those assets. But mostly just find out where you are and then think about, what will you do for income post-divorce? If you've been a stay-at-home mom, will you go to school? Is there a job you can just start, or will you not work? And if you choose not to, would your assets that you'd likely end up with be enough to support that? And then I think where you live is the other thing to really think about ahead of time. With women, what we often see is they want to keep the house, particularly if there are still children living at home, because they don't want to disrupt their lives any more than necessary. But in most cases, if they're not the primary wage earner, it doesn't make sense for them to try to upkeep the marital home, because even if there's no mortgage, the costs of upkeep on that residence are probably too much for them. And if they take the equity in the home in lieu of, let's say, retirement assets, that could put them in a bad position down the road. So just things like that to think about ahead of time so that you can start to map out what your new life will look like and make sure that financially you'll be secure. Because I think that 3-year period that you're referencing has a lot to do with fear of finances.
Okay, so you just said so many things there. You talked about, I think I could be wrong, but is this called the stool of personal finance, the 3 legs, the stool of personal finance, which I think is income, assets, and debt? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So you talked about all these things. You have to figure out your income, the income of the household, and then your personal income, the assets. And if you're not sure what the assets are, looking at the tax returns can be a real clue into assets you might not be aware of. And then debts, which, can be anything from credit card debt to mortgages to personal loans. Maybe grab a credit report on you and your spouse to figure out those debts. And so figure out, step 1, figure out where you're at. And then the step 2 is figure out a plan for the future and understand that your life post-divorce will not look like your life pre-divorce. If you are a stay-at-home mom, you're probably not going to be a stay-at-home mom because number one, you probably will not be able to afford to do it. Most of the time, you can't afford to do it. And number two, Arizona is a state that is going to presume equal parenting time to two good parents, no matter how you ran your household while you were married. So you talked about, figuring out what are my income producing assets. That is probably the only time that a woman or a man can plan not to work after divorce. This basically means you have enough money and enough income producing assets to retire. So think about it that way. Like if you are not ready to retire, then you're probably going to have to get a job. And the sooner you can start figuring out how to maximize the income leg of your personal financial stool, the better you'll be when you go to talk to Julie and you're getting a divorce.
Absolutely. You nailed it.
Well, and a lot of people really fear, they fear, will getting a job hurt my spousal maintenance claim? That is an understandable position, and it probably worked in the 80s and maybe in the 90s. But today, that doesn't help you at all. I mean, it might help you for 3 months or 6 months, but it is not a long-term plan. Spousal maintenance is not a good long-term plan. It will either supplement what you need or it will get you to where you are barely making ends meet, but it will not be the cash cow usually that you think it would be. So how do you help women look at this situation and figure out, they're done with their 3-year period, right? They filed for divorce, they've come to you, now what?
So the first step that I want to do is wrap my arms around their financial situation. And we use some special software to put all of the information in, and then we can map out different possible settlements. And we most often will try to equalize assets that have the same tax treatment. So Roth IRAs get taxed, well, they don't get taxed. Our traditional IRA gets taxed a different way. A brokerage account gets taxed a different way. So we try to equalize those. But many times the house is a big asset that can't be equalized unless they choose to sell it. So, often my recommendation is that for the wife in particular, who's not been the high income earner, that she not try to keep it because she's going to have to give up other assets that are liquid that you can buy groceries with in an attempt to keep a lower appreciating asset that you can't buy groceries with. So, just by actually being able to show that, illustrate that, and, say, okay, if this happens, and we assume that you work at this job or you go back to school for a couple of years, maybe you get spousal maintenance for 2 years or something like that, and you go back and brush up on your skills. Here's what your future is likely to look like. And here's what you can really afford in different areas like housing and, food. And we don't want someone's budget to be 60% allocated to housing, right?
Right.
So it can help to just be able to show them in a visual way, their options. And then if we did it this way instead, if you're willing to, let's say, let go of the house and understand that kids are resilient and they adjust way better than we think they will, this could produce a much better result for you. And I think that's the part where that really helps them to make better decisions.
I think everything you're saying is so important. I was talking to a mom yesterday, stay-at-home mom. There's a lot of equity in the house because right now there's a lot of equity in everybody's house. And that's a great thing. But she wanted to trade, keeping the majority of the equity in the house for no spousal maintenance. And, I asked her, well, how are you going to qualify to refinance the house to buy out any of the equity? And then what income will you have to pay your mortgage? And so one of the reasons that women recover so much, slower after divorce is how are you setting yourself up financially moving forward? Can you afford to pay your bills? Can you afford to save money post-divorce? So anything you can do, and this is for men and women, anything you can do to decrease your expenses while you're going through divorce and shortly thereafter, while you rebuild your career and you invest in your new life, anything you can do to reduce your expenses is going to be in your best interest long term. Now you probably see that play out much more than I do because you're looking at people's portfolios. So what is the difference between somebody who reduces their expenses versus somebody who doesn't in terms of long-term portfolios?
That's probably the single biggest factor. When we run long-term financial plans for our clients, a little bit of change in spending, and I'm talking as little as $5,000 a year, can really make a difference. We use Monte Carlo simulation, which just means that they get a probability of success in having enough money to live out the rest of their lives, even if they live past their actuarial life expectancy, because guess what? Some people do. And it'd be nice to have money if you're that person. So we like to make sure our clients have enough money to live to be 100 years old in the event that they do.
Yeah.
And when you see that cutting back by just a few $100s a month now can add your, to your probability of success significantly on the other end. Because I mean, even if you're 50 years old, let's say getting a divorce, that's 50 years of spending a little bit less each month. And it really makes a difference. So yeah, that's huge.
And I want to talk about the kid thing for a minute because I talk pretty openly on the podcast about my personal experience. I've got 4 kids. When I got divorced, I moved out and I moved into a house that was close to my kids' school because I was going to, have a hard time with transportation now going from 2 drivers and 2 parents to 1 driver. So it was very important for me to get like logistically close, but it was probably the same size as my starter home that I was in when I was 22. And it was hard, just to be perfectly honest. I was in this house for 18 months. I was a lawyer. I owned a practice. And I was in this little starter home without a pool with my 4 kids half the time. But did it like hurt my kids? It didn't like, and did it help me recover from the divorce? Yes. Without a doubt. Like 3 years later after the divorce, it's like, oh my gosh, there was a very quick recovery because I was very conservative in the beginning. And kids do adjust if they have your time and if they have you as a mentally, like if you are okay, if you can do anything to reduce your stress, which includes reducing your financial stress, reducing your emotional stress, that is so much more important than do I live in a 3,500 square foot house with a big pool?
Exactly. And the point that you didn't state is that your kids learn from that. And they learn that when you live below your means, you can grow your wealth over time. But if you spend above your means, the opposite happens. So it's a great way to train your kids about finances as well.
It's true. And unfortunately, kids often see 2 parents do 2 very different things. And unfortunately, they often see their mamas live above their means and their dads don't. And then there's this dynamic you get so often where moms are resentful of dads for not continuing to take care of them. And like, guys, there is another way. There is another way than to just be mad at your ex-husband for not continuing to take care of you forever.
Right. And I think some of that is just part of the grief process, which some people cycle through more quickly than others. And some people get stuck in certain stages of grief, and anger, of course, is one of those. So, to your point of reducing your stress, also having a mental health professional or someone that you can talk to help you move past that is way more important to your kids' well-being than what house they live in.
You're exactly right. And so much of what we're talking about is expectations and mindset. Like, who are you depending on to take care of you? Is it, whatever happened in your 15 or 20 or 30-year marriage, are you depending on that and that person and that life to take care of you for the rest of your life? Or are you mindset wise understanding this is a full transition? Like, that life is done. I have a new chapter. How do I make the best decisions for myself in my new chapter? And think about how freeing that is, ladies, to no longer be bitter and resentful and dependent, and instead write your own journey.
Yes, absolutely.
So how do you work with divorce attorneys, and how do you help women make this transition?
Sure. So I either meet women directly. Most often, I think that comes just from an internet search. As you, I'm sure, know, when people are considering divorce, they often go to the internet because they don't want everyone in their social circle to know yet.
Yeah.
And so I do meet a lot of women directly. I also am brought in by attorneys quite often. Mm-hmm. And so depending on the situation, I may be brought in early in the case, or sometimes not until there's a situation that they need help resolving, like what's the value of this pension, or how do we equalize this settlement when there's a business involved, or something like that. But I can do my best work if I'm brought in early and can help with the decisions along the way. So I, fee-wise, work off of a retainer similar to what I'm sure you do. And then, but one of the great pieces is that, from my perspective, one of the great pieces about the way that I work is that I always can deliver a monetary value to my clients above what they pay me. Like, it's just really easy to measure in that scenario, because if you ended up with, more spousal maintenance or a better settlement, it's really easy to see the dollar value in that. So it's, while it's an extra expense on the front end, I have yet to have a case where I didn't deliver more than that in terms of helping them negotiate for better settlement. And I think my favorite scenario is mediation. And fortunately, that's really common.
Yeah.
So that's great. I think it's a much better way to settle your divorce. And again, that's just one of the places where being able to model different things on the fly can really make a difference, because you're in this concentrated time period having to make these really important decisions, and the options keep changing back and forth.
Right.
As you go through it, whether it's a formal mediation or more of an informal series of mediation appointments. But if I can actually participate in that and say, okay, if you accepted this offer, here's what it would look like. I think it really helps people make better decisions and feel better about the decisions they can make.
Yeah, I love that. You said a couple things here I want to clarify. Do you value pensions, stock options, vested, unvested?
Yes, all of that.
Do you value businesses?
No.
Okay, that's fantastic. I think it would be so valuable to have a CDFA be able to run those scenarios and help people make decisions and help people make offers as well. Because if you can make an offer that says, here's what I'm offering, and this is what this means for you in the future, versus here's what I'm offering. And most often people get an offer and they don't even know what it means. They literally are like, I don't know if this is fair. I don't know if it's unfair. Am I leaving money on the table? And that's one of the things that stops people from settling.
Agree. Yep. Having that clarity and the confidence about your decisions really matters and helps to move things forward. And not just financially move things forward, or as far as moving the divorce forward, but helping you to move forward psychologically if you feel at peace with the decisions that you made.
Lack of information is one of the biggest problems in divorce. And the litigation system doesn't necessarily make people feel cozy that they've got access to information. So that's one problem. And then the other problem is, you can get an offer and you can kind of see numbers on paper, but if you don't know what that means to you, or you don't understand finances, it can really slow up a divorce, which eats up money that you could be using for a lot of other things, I mean, your housing, your living, your education, savings, anything. So anything you can do to also reduce the transactional costs of a divorce, and invest in those costs that only pay dividends, like you were talking about. So if you hire a CDFA, you're going to end up with a better financial situation. So it's an investment worth making. Oftentimes, the same is true for an attorney. Not in every single case, but oftentimes, not having an attorney will cost you more in the long run than having an attorney. And figuring out in your specific circumstance, do I need an attorney? How much should I be willing to spend? And at what point would the cost of litigation outweigh any benefits is also a tough analysis. Is it one that you can help people with?
Sure, absolutely. My parents' divorce story is a perfect example of two people who, quote, stayed together for the kids way too long. And so when they finally divorced, I had just moved out from home. My younger sister was still at home, but they literally spent most of their wealth on their divorce. And I saw court transcripts that where they were arguing over things like the lawnmower and the barbecue grill, spending more money than it would have probably cost to replace either of those items. They in fact had a visitation arrangement with the lawnmower where my mom would keep it at the house, but my dad could come and borrow it. That was where they landed.
Wow.
So anyway, when my mom passed away years later and the house was sold, there was actually a lien on it from her attorney that had to be paid.
Wow.
So yeah, you can waste a lot of money, and emotion can drive some of that if you have resentment or bitterness toward your spouse. So really, like you mentioned earlier, trying to keep your mindset and your focus on what your new life will look like is really where it is. And I don't think you or I, either one, diminish the work that it takes to stay in that mindset, because at times things are very trying and emotional, but to the extent that you can really focus on that, you'll come out way ahead financially and psychologically.
Totally, absolutely, fundamentally true. It's really interesting. Your parents' divorce happened in your life about the same time my parents' divorce happened in my life. And it had such an impact on me as a young adult watching it play out that I, at that point, knew I wanted to be a divorce attorney. Divorce can be hugely impactful on children, and the way that you handle it and the way that you experience it as parents is also, they're watching and they're learning. And does my mom and do my dad, are they future focused? Are they positive focused? Are they willing to set aside their own hurt and take care of me and focus on taking care of me as a kid? Or are they so, wrapped up in grief, which is so real, but you confront it, confront it, deal with it, move on, because it will chain you down.
So true.
Julie, this has been fantastic. It wasn't exactly where I planned to go with it, but I think our conversation was fabulous, and I really enjoyed it. And how can people reach you if they want to work with you as a CDFA?
Sure. A great place to start is just to visit our website, which is bridgedivorcestrategies.com. And there is a contact form there. So you can type in as much or as little information as you're comfortable with at the outset. I always do a free initial consultation just to hear about your situation and to hear, how I might help. It's not important to have a financial expert on every case. Mm-hmm. So I'll be able to tell you if that's a case for you. So just reach out via the website. You can also call our office, and the number's on the website as well. So that's a great place to start.
Awesome. Ladies, gentlemen, do it. Do it early. Do it before you get divorced. Do it if you're in a divorce. Do it if it's after divorce. Like you cannot really focus too much on your own personal finances. You really can't. That's just my 2 cents based on my father's pounding it into my head. Yep. Good to meet you, Julie. And we'll talk again soon.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.